So this was a story of my first encounter with dream body medicine, or the work that Arnie Mindell and his colleagues had developed at the Jung Institute in Zurich. Later, after starting the training myself, I had the real privilege to have Arnie and Amy come to the clinic I was working, and I was working at that time in neurorehabilitation with people after severe brain injuries. And Arnie came to the hospital and for one day worked with the people that we were taking care of. And it really introduced me to this idea that you could relate to people even in very remote states of consciousness. At that time, medicine really thought of these people as being in a vegetative state, meaning they were there sometimes with open eyes and having, sleeping at night and being more awake during the day. But we all would think that they were in this vegetative state, unconscious and unresponsive. But the work that Arnie introduced me to showed me that you could actually relate to them and that they would respond. This is a fact that now, 30 years later, actually, the medical community has recognized, and we now define these states of consciousness after brain injury in a very differentiated way, and we know that many of them actually remain very conscious even though they can't respond. So that experience allowed me and helped me to work with people in remote states of consciousness. And with my friend Gary Reese, I wrote this book, my first book, Inside Coma, in which I describe that really powerful work with people in so-called comatose states. After that, I continued my training and I really started thinking about the dream body concept and how to apply it in the medical field. And I started thinking in terms of two parallel concepts, one that I call health in sickness, which means that there is actually healthy information in the experience of sickness. So that's why the term health in sickness. But also the opposite, that there is sickness in health, meaning that our way to approach health in conventional medicine puts people in a marginalized space. They get kind of put out of what we call or we deem as normal or as healthy, and thus they experience feeling marginalized, and that creates an additional way of experiencing pain and suffering. So it's an additional burden of suffering. So the idea of sickness in health. So for everybody who's interested, this is the book that I wrote 5 years ago, and in which I really developed these ideas of health and sickness in health. So let me share you a little bit of that experience of then that I now describe in this book, Big Medicine, from showing things. So imagine that you are lying on a doctor's examination table, wearing just underwear and a loose patient's robe that leaves you barely protected and amplifies your feeling of vulnerability. The doctor comes in with the test results you have been anticipating for more than a week. He gives you his verdict. Either you fall inside or outside the range of normality and health. And if the results are not good, you immediately sense that you've been thrown out of your previously familiar territory of health and normality. Your doctor's demeanor changes, and everybody around you suddenly treats you differently. With one test result, everything can change. You feel like a different person, and your family and friends approach you as if you might die next week. What is going on? So conventional medicine uses normal distribution or bell curves to determine what we view as healthy and normal. I don't know if you remember from your high school study, this bell curve is a statistical way of describing a normal range of situations. For example, in medicine, if you have you look at your blood sugar, the blood sugar has a specific range in which it is deemed to be normal, and the distribution, statistical distribution, follows this shape of a bell curve. So conventional medicine uses this normal distribution or bell curves to determine what we view as healthy and normal. It compares our individual health markers to statistical norms to see if they deviate or conform. While deviations help us define what is normal, this process shapes our experience of our own health and makes us feel marginalized, expelled from the land of health, and inferior if we don't fit inside this bell curve. Big medicine, in contrast, values the outlier experiences as much as those that fit within the bell curve. It rejects the narrow duality of health and sickness in favor of a process-informed perspective that explores our experience, but be it of so-called health or sickness.